It is Monday, October 16th, 2023. It is 5 p.m. And if you would join me in the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Let us pray. Father, thank you for this time together. Thank you, Lord, for the business of the city. And Lord, we thank you for your wisdom and guidance through every decision that we make today. Lord, that it will be the best decision for our citizens, Lord, and most important, that it glorifies you in everything we do. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Manager, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, sir. I'd like to delete item D under consent agenda for further review at the request of the chamber, and we'll bring it back once adjusted. Item D under consent agenda. Also, would like to add, we have two handouts for item number 9 from the city manager's update. One of them is the golf course irrigation project financing memo that you have before you, and for the finance director to present the letter of credit recommendation for renewal of our required letter of credit with FDOT. And I'd suggest you do that item under the manager's report as well, an A and a B. And then those are the adjustments I had. Also, I had prepared and shared with the commission in advance a potential proclamation for your consideration. If you're so inclined to add that to the agenda, then I'll leave that to the mayor and board members' discretion. I have a copy of it there if you're interested.
Any discussion on adding the proclamation for the condemning the attacks on Israel to the agenda? We can add it at the consent agenda or item 1A.
I think adding on the agenda would be fine, under the consent agenda.
Under consent agenda? Okay. Is that okay with everyone? All right, we'll add the proclamation, which, since it's not in the public record, I'll go ahead and read it. A proclamation of the City Commission of the City of Clewiston, Florida, condemning the October 7th, 2023 terrorist attack on the State of Israel. And it's a little lengthy, so we'll have that available for the public to read. We'll put that under the consent agenda as item S. Okay, if there's no other changes, now we will have public comments. You would state your name and address.
Thank you. Stephanie Busen, 429 Royal Palm Avenue. Mayor, Honorable Commission, I'm here to talk today about our homeless population in Clewiston and the impact it has on myself as a private property owner at the address I just stated. So today I had an experience. I've decided I'm going to be working on my fitness and was going to go and walk at the Civic Park, which is one of our crown jewels of Clewiston, sit right there in the middle of the town between U.S. Sugar's corporate offices and the Clewiston Inn. And when I got to the east side of it, made my loop on the east side, everything looked great. And when I started headed back towards the west side where the banyan tree is, we had a full-on homeless camp. And I've come here and I've spoken to, we had the homeless population squatting in abandoned residential places around my neighborhood, but they were, and I waited till daylight because
I was going to ask you what time you went.
For safety purposes. It was after 7 o'clock, probably about 10 after 7. And I called the police department immediately, and of course I let them all know I was calling the police department, make it very clear how I feel about their presence there. And they responded and they ran them off. And so I like to see what's going on. So I was walking around Woodworks, and while I was walking around Woodworks, a grown man jumped up and he saw me and I saw him and I glared at him and then he took his business on somewhere else. But, this is a situation that is having a negative impact on my quality of life in the neighborhood and my family's quality of life. Friday evening, my kid was at a high school football game. My youngest one, old enough to be home alone, 14 years old, was telling me, Mom, there are people, we know who they are. They're the frequent flyers in the neighborhood. But they are over at the Presbyterian church getting food out of the box. I was like, well, just go in the house and lock the doors. I didn't want him making a report to the police department. But, it's in our neighborhoods. It's in our sidewalks. Along with just, it's not the homelessness, the nature of homelessness. It's what's happening, the comorbidities with that, and suspected prostitution. It's not what you would consider to be America's sweetest town. And my neighborhood being so close to you, close to a couple commissioners here, we're so close to that heart of Clewiston, and where we have these taxpayer-funded resources and places that we want to have children coming, and we need some kind of reprieve from that. And I'm here today just to ask for, once again, the commission to consider what can be done about this. It is negatively impacting the quality of life around there. I like to call myself the neighborhood captain, and I take that seriously. And and my other neighbors have expressed some of the same issues, and they're not as spicy as me, so they're not going to come up here and say it publicly. But that neighborhood's struggling. I don't want to see it take a downward turn. And particularly just the facilities that we want to accommodate families and children. You don't want that kind of stuff there. And
Definitely agree with you.
mm-hmm.
What we can do about it would not be between some law enforcement I see back there, or the lawyer, our attorney. I'm willing to do whatever the law will allow, and maybe even a little more.
Yeah.
So can you kind of enlighten us on what legally?
Right. So it's a very delicate subject area, and it's something that many communities throughout the state have to deal with. Being homeless is not a crime, but certainly, if there's any kind of trespassing or property damage or any other crime happening as a result of that, that can be enforced. In the recent past, some communities and cities have taken steps, legislation, to try to address some things like that. And some of them, unfortunately, it hasn't worked out in a positive way. The city of West Palm Beach, within the last several years, I think made national headlines because they had implemented a policy where they were playing music at night to discourage homeless populations from camping around some of their public buildings in downtown West Palm Beach. That did not work out well for the city. Like I said, it made national headlines. There was a lawsuit involved, I believe, and that's no longer the policy there. So if you are going to take legislative area in that arena, it is a delicate one, and it's something that you have to tread lightly on. If you'd like me to do some research as to what the avenues are that you can legislate in that area, I'd be happy to do so. That's the consensus of the commission. You'd like me to bring something, maybe some
Dylan, I don't
options
think we
back
have a
for you.
choice.
Right.
Exactly what Stephanie just brought up. I had called Randy last week about that. I personally had witnessed some things, and I had another walker who's, somebody who's enjoying our parks, said that she could no longer walk without having some pepper spray with her because she was concerned about what she was seeing. And I know that homelessness is not a crime, but the quality of our lives, as well as what I'm concerned about is the children in our parks.
And those
Not
concerns
knowing,
are justified as
not
well.
knowing, because it's not just a random occasion. When you have somebody who decides to pull up a pillow and a sheet and lay on a swing and sleep, even though our parks are closed at night, that's not acceptable. And even during the day, I don't know. I know there's loitering laws, but I know it's a public park. But at what point does living in the park become loitering or sleeping in the park? So I think we have to find a solution to this problem, because it is a problem, and I think it's going to continue to get worse if we don't address it in I think a responsible manner. I mean, we don't have the resources as a town to be able to help people. I mean, you mentioned that the church had a box for food, but other communities that are larger than we are, they have centers, they have training, they have kitchens to address this issue. We don't, and I think that these people do need help. Now, some of them might not want the help because, as Stephanie said, some of these are frequent flyers. They've been arrested before, they've been in jail. Now, I don't know what laws protect them, especially when it comes to children, if they're felons in the park or if they're still known for their habits, what they're doing in our parks. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that it is a concern for us all, many in the community.
If I could ask, can they be served a trespass warning for being in the parks after hours? So if we have posted hours, they can't be trespassed and arrested.
Yeah, so the park's closed at 9 o'clock, and then they open up in the morning, trespass for 3 hours.
Right, correct. I'll tell you a big game changer for me. I have a friend that a couple months ago took his daughter to Woodward Park, and he come across these little white baggies. You all know what they are. Now, before you pick them up, throw them in the garbage. Or a kid come across it, you take it, throw it in the garbage. Today, a kid come across it, they're dead. It's fatal. This fentanyl is fatal to me, a child, law enforcement officer, and I don't care around Narcan. That's a game changer for me because they're there. I don't have any answers, but
But
that
I
really
think
raises
our
me.
ordinance, if I'm not mistaken, is sunrise to sunset.
I think it is for that.
They can, they can be there, but from sunset to sunrise, they can't be in any public park area. I believe that's our ordinance, what it states.
No, as we have lighted facilities. I was going to comment.
okay.
We today we actually had them. It's not isolated at Civic Park. Unfortunately, we had a situation occurring at today at gosh, the name just left me. A park that we're getting ready to build a new playground in Trinidad. And actually had an incident where Narcan had to be applied to one of the homeless and to save the life. That was one that was evicted this morning. I saw him being evicted from Civic Park, which is interesting but and sad. But we also are having problems and we've had this before at the ball fields at Sugarland Park in the dugouts. So, particularly when the weather cools and they're looking for shelter or it's heavy rain. So it is a citywide issue that we're going to have to contend with. And as Ms. Buston pointed out, we've had issues of them at private properties, and they move around. Several of them have local ties, and that's really sad when people know who they are. But I don't have the answer, but we certainly can, as Dylan suggested, do the research, and the police department continue to enforce what they can, and anything else we can do on private property to protect private property, I think we should.
I think it'd be prudent for us to, number one, do some training for our staff, the Parks and Rec. Maybe they can canvass that in the mornings and have some training on how to handle that stuff if they come across it. Because it's deadly. You know, that was an individual that may have been using. How about the poor person that come across and touches the paraphernalia? It is fatal. And we can do something like that just to protect the kids in the park and our staff.
We actually did do a training through the police department last year, and a number of staff from several departments went through it on one that used the Narcan, as well as the dangers associated with any of the paraphernalia.
How about doing some cleanup or canvassing in the morning? Parks, at least Woodward is the one that's trafficked the most.
I have a quick question. From the law enforcement side, if you're like Ms. Buston called, law enforcement, when we arrive on scene, do we have a standard that like a standard procedure that we do? Do we run names? Do we? Okay. Okay.
Always on the phone. That's tomorrow. I guess. Always on. Always on the phone. All we're doing is pushing them.
I got a question, if you can confirm it for me or not. I've heard that once they're arrested, they're bused back to Clewiston. Is that true?
Well, let's start enforcing what we have, and then if we need to adjust the times on the parks, so at least when people are, and at midnight, no one's there, as far as our people, the citizens. But let's make sure they're out of there from sunrise to 9 a.m. so our citizens can walk through the park and walk through these areas. But,
And again in the
but
afternoon.
immediately, let's enforce what we have. And
Yeah. The last Thursday night, to that point, after the incident of a tent was reported earlier in the week, one of the officers that was doing patrols came through here. We had a couple of them in an altercation out here near City Hall. After a meeting, I was late leaving, and the officer went over, and I went too, and they removed them from the park that evening because it was hard to see them. You got to go out there and around that banyan tree. It's really dark, and so I know they removed them that night, but as reported, they're back, and different ones maybe. I don't know if it's the same ones.
And also, I mean, I have also heard about folks being put on a bus to come here and dropped off here, as well after they're released from, wherever they've been. But I think that, the bottom line issue is that these are people that maybe they don't want help. But I mean, is there anything else we can do about taking them to where they need to go, or taking them to where there's facilities available for them to get help. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know legally what we can do and we can't trespass them. I don't know. I'm just asking that question because I think if there's facilities in Naples, facilities in St. Petersburg, facilities in Orlando, in Tampa, in West Palm that help individuals, it would be great if they could get the help they need because we can't provide that help. And just allowing them to continue, enabling them to continue in these habits and in this destruction of quality of life for a lot of our community. I think that, because you've got people who are fearful of in their neighborhood when they see people that shouldn't be there, and people in our parks that shouldn't be there. So I just think we've got to come up with something completely different than what we've been doing. And I think there's ordinances that we can look at, but also I think that we need to take a step further and see how we can help these people get to where they need to be to get help. And I don't know how willing they have to be. I just am asking that question from a legal standpoint.
And I have one more. I know we're focused on being in the parks and areas like this now, but when my little precious, I'm an aunt now, and when my niece was here, we were out strolling, and I noticed the day before there was a Winnebago, not in great shape, but it was backed up in front of like U.S. Sugar corporate offices, and I looked back there on that table, and they had some folks sitting there, so I made a mental note. The next day, I'm out strolling with my little niece, and that same Winnebago was backed up by the Cheeky Hut by the youth center and plugged in to city utilities. And of course, I called and told on them. That's my niece's first complaint. And they came out there. The person was acting erratic in the middle of Royal Palm. They responded, and I'm thinking, okay, this is like this behavior here, this being plugged into utilities is going to be probable cause for a pat down. They were out there with them for a while, but then the Winnebago just drove off. And by not making this an less than hospitable situation for this kind of behavior, I feel like it just emboldens. And the backed up Winnebago plugged into utilities was definitely a very good example of emboldened behavior. So, I appreciate you guys listened to me today, and I'd like once again to suggest that we have a vacant facility next door, and the former police department. And I think maybe if our city leadership was having to look at it every day in the same way that my neighbors are having to look at it and deal with it, we might be a little more inspired to come up with solutions and be more progressive in meeting this need of actual taxpayers in our community. But thank you for your time.
I don't disagree at all that making an example of somebody, whether it's like the Winnebago or wherever we can to make it much more clear that we're not going to tolerate this kind of thing.
I just heard now that person they pushed out of the park today overdosed in Trinidad Park. Did we pat him down today and see if he had the fentanyl on him then? It's you want them to know it's not going to work out well if we catch you here. And so appreciate all you guys are doing. Appreciate the city police. We'll race y'all to the park tomorrow, and we will. I want to work together and get our neighborhoods under control. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Any other public comments? All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
With item D removed.
Item D removed and item S added.
Yes, thank you.
Can I second and ask for discussion?
Sure. Okay, second by Haslow. Discussion?
Yeah, just one thing. The additional item, the proclamation, I do not disagree with. However, I would note that we don't make proclamations and take issues with probably, I would say, like the majority of global situations. And I think that could become a little bit tricky, and cumbersome if that were to continue. Anyway, just wanted to note that.
for the record.
Good, completely, yes.
And I think that, we don't usually look at global issues, but when we have something to the degree that we've had right now, and knowing that there's, when terrorist activities happens like this to an ally or a country, I think it's important that we do speak up. And by just having a proclamation, I think it's important that because of the activity, this is something that, other than 9/11, we haven't seen.
Question?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's move on to item 2, which is ordinance number 2023-08. This is a first reading. Ordinance 2023-08 amends Chapter 70, Article 5, operation of golf carts on city streets of the City Code of Ordinance. I'll read it by title and then we can discuss it. Ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Clewiston, Florida, amending Chapter 70, Article 5, operation of golf carts on city streets, providing for codification, severability, providing for a repeal of laws in conflict, and providing for an effective date. This is the first reading, so it is a public hearing. Anyone that would like to speak on this matter, from what I understand, the lawyer can confirm that the state ordinance changed, so we have to change our ordinance to match. And if you want to kind of brief everyone on the changes.
Sure, Mayor. So we discussed this at our last workshop. In the latest legislative session, some changes were made that requires us to update our own ordinance. This is probably one of my favorite weird legislative kind of oddities that have left over in the state statutes, where the state statute says that you can only regulate, that local governments can only regulate golf carts for unlicensed drivers. And now the new legislation that just passed says you can't drive one unless you have a license. So I always like to bring that up because I think it's funny. And when the legislature initially made that original amendment, there was a last-minute amendment to the bill on the floor of the legislature in Tallahassee, and there's no history as to why they wanted to add that, but essentially the state language is a preemption that prevents local governments from legislating in that arena. So this is exactly what you saw at the workshop. It brings our current ordinance up to speed with the state requirements, and that's all I have to say about it. If you're under the age of 18, you can no longer operate a golf cart, and unless you have a valid learner's permit.
Somebody wanted their name on the bill.
I suppose so. It's just one of those odd things. Nobody seems to know how that ended up in the state law.
Okay. Just to clarify, they have to have a driver's license or what we used to call the restricted license.
Correct.
Okay.
From 16 above, nothing under 16, correct?
And nothing under 16.
Well, 15 would have a learner's permit.
So what would be the answer to that?
I think 16.
I think the law says that it must be 18 years of age or have a valid driver's license or learner's permit. It
Yeah.
doesn't.
So
If 15 is the age for
18, yeah.
learners, then if they have one, they're allowed.
But don't they have to have a parent room?
They have to have a legal driver, somebody
That's
with
why
a
we're
license.
legal driver, yeah.
Yeah, with the learners.
I think
Yeah.
that's correct.
If they're under 16.
Yeah, because it says, I think it was it says in there somewhere. I looked it up. The 316, whatever it was
Right.
in here. It talks about who can drive and who can't in the state statutes. Not in this ordinance, but in
No,
the state statutes.
We're primarily referencing the state regulation, and then our ordinance.
16-12.
We're eliminating the conflicts in our ordinance with the new statute.
We are open for public comments. Jerry?
Jerry Cockery, question for clarification. Are ATVs allowed?
I don't think so.
That
because-
hasn't changed.
Because it has to have a maximum speed limit, the vehicle that I was reading in there. And don't ask me to quote it right now. Be considered a golf cart, like for this ordinance, it has to be X mile per hour or less.
25 or under, yeah.
Okay.
I think the state law addresses ATVs that you can't drive them on sidewalks or roads. Is that correct?
including side buildings.
I don't know the specific state law on ATVs. I'd have to look it up. This only relates to golf carts. If there's a concern about ATVs, we can take a look at that.
Well, I got a concern because occasionally I'll have one racing by my house. It's certainly not a golf cart. So,
Yeah, I don't.
and I
they
think
can be on the
a
road.
lot of people just think that's a golf cart. It's legal. I don't think they're doing it intentionally for the most part. But it's also my understanding that they're not allowed. But there are more than one of them running around on the street. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? All right, any comments from the commission?
I know that at the workshop, I think the chief mentioned that, because the law just went into effect this month, that it would be, they would be letting everybody know what the law stated. But after a while, after everybody was told that, there would definitely be enforcement of the new law as well as the city ordinance once we approve it.
Okay, we'll declare the public hearing closed and entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Gardner. Second by Edmonds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 3 on the agenda. Resolution 2023-106. This provides a resolution of the City of Clewiston approving school concurrency interlocal agreement for Henry County, the City of LaBelle, the City of Clewiston, and the School Board of Henry County. And from what I understand, this is just an expiring resolution that needs to be redone. And I think it will take us through, how many years was it, Randy?
I don't remember the length, but it's, we'll check that, but I'm not sure if it's until it's replaced, but it's replacing a 2006 agreement that was reached interlocal and was originally adopted in 03, updated in 06, and hasn't been updated since. And the requisite meetings haven't been held, I'm understanding, between all the groups to plan for school sightings, because the county hasn't built any new schools during that period. So now they are pursuing plans to construct new schools, and it's required that all the agencies that are impacted meet and discuss all the stipulations within it. So it's to update the ordinance to comply with the current statutory authority and re-implement the actual meeting process. And I think they're planning the first one to be in early 2024. Because I think the county is under pressure to get this done because the schools have applied for funding to build their first new school in the LaBelle area, and this will cover all future school construction. I know Dylan was asked to review it from the county attorney, prepared it, and I don't know if he has anything to add.
I don't have anything to add in regard to your comment. I believe it automatically renews unless you terminate, and you just have to give 4 months of notice. But this agreement is just something that's sort of required by state statute and sort of encapsulates a lot of those requirements into a written agreement.
Right.
That's all it is. And it's something we've had in the past. It's just been updated.
Okay, any further discussion of the commission? Motion? Motion by Highslope.
Second.
Second by Thompson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4 is a resolution 2023-107, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Clewiston, Florida, approving change order number 6 to work order number 4 of the continuing agreement for professional services between the City of Clewiston and Johnson Engineering, Inc. for the C-21 Bridge project. Randy, if you'll fill us in on what
Okay,
this is.
you see in here, I've previously briefed the board that we have been working with an engineer to come up with a redesign considerations for the existing parking areas that are impacted by the new bridge and requiring changes. We were able to get them to do this covers the engineering design work as well as the survey work. And you see the modified plans that they have prepared, which the good news is the modifications will increase the number of parking spaces, I think by a total of 39. We currently don't have any designated vehicle-only spaces. We'll pick up 15. We'll add 35 pull-in trailer and with towing vehicle spaces, for a total of, I believe it'll be 146. We'll end up with 185 parking spaces in each of the categories, with the vast majority being the pull-in truck and trailer being 163 of the 185. This fortunately is an eligible expense within the grant funds the city received for the project, and we have unencumbered funds sufficient to do this. We've requested DOT approval to allow us to do the modifications with the funding that remains, and we've also required or inquired of the current contractor to get a pricing to do these changes. We will compare that pricing with any alternative if it's deemed unreasonable before we pursue an actual change order to do the work. It will require some additional asphalt and obviously relining and redoing the parking areas as indicated. We did involve the marina in reviewing the design to see if they had any comments, since they are the primary user at their tournaments and have the insights of the various boating visitors who use it to get their input. Danny and I have met with the engineer on site. Dave Trudeau's here tonight to answer any questions. Andy, again, I mentioned earlier to those that were here that he just got back from vacation, so Dave's filling in tonight. If you have any specific questions, but it does modify the routes a bit, expands the pavement a little bit to pick up those additional spaces near the bridge side of it. And it, of course, eliminates the current traffic pattern that goes to the old crossing that's gone and realigns those spaces. So parking blocks, all the lines, resealing the parking lot, everything will be necessary to make this work. But at this point, we're hopeful that the funding that's included and unencumbered will be sufficient to pay for all of it, but we don't have those prices yet. We also included getting prices for extension of a couple of the sidewalks that currently dead end that will be necessary as a result to get them to the bridge. I don't know if Danny, you have any comment on it? You've been down there and looked at it. Okay.
Now we know how Andy went on vacation.
All right, Dave, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I said or answer questions if you have any of the engineer.
Yeah, you said 185 spaces total?
It'll be 185 on this is what's depicted. Currently, there's 146. 18 of the 146 existing were trailer back-in only. That's where they really weren't designed to accommodate a trailer and a vehicle. But those will be replaced in their entirety with pull-in truck and trailer spaces like all the rest of them. And then we'll pick up, I believe, 15 car-only spaces. just in incidental areas where they're not big enough for a trailer. And
Those are red dots and the
yeah, the
yellow
red dots are the vehicle only.
and the yellow ones, the yellow dots.
Let me see. I believe those are the back end trailer only, and 4 of them are tight. It require a smaller vehicle or a smaller trailer, but 4 of them, the yellow ones, are the vehicle and trailer.
With the removal of the spillway, can this be remapped a little different, or does this match the future with that spillway? The spillway, when it's removed, this flow path is still with the spillway. If we redesign that, will it open up any more parking spots on the boat basin on the south side? Has that been taken in consideration, that that spillway is going to be gone? No longer going to... This flow right here, this in the future will still be the same, even though this won't be here. Traffic will not be going.
It is.
Right. Yeah, that is in consideration.
But it's moved over. If you're talking about the one that goes to the current crossing, if you're talking about that, that's been relocated.
Shifted. The road coming through here,
Yeah.
right now it's shifted over. So
And it also goes closer to the canal on the west side of it. We'll be paving an area there to make for that. That right now is grassed and not. It's just a sand road. So that'll be expanded. That's how we're able to pick up that many spaces.
So the retention pond still stays, correct?
The retention pond there isn't one on this site. They relocated it on the west side, so it's no longer where it was. It's located further south, I believe, Dave.
yeah,
Towards this extended sidewalk on the south side. It goes almost straight towards it. There's a new retention area there. And then there's areas beyond the access road that we had to construct for South Florida Water Management to be able to access beyond the site. There's an area there that's still part of the old area that for stormwater retention and runoff.
Are you,
I'm missing that map you have there, Randy, because that doesn't look like what we have here.
It's the same map. It just had the numbers on it. It's the same one. It just it had the numbers. I'll be glad to provide that one because it gives a breakdown of the numbers along with an aerial photo that gives a little better picture. I got those after.
Give us that, please.
Yeah, you can see a little bit.
I'd like you to consider a couple of items, and that's where the road comes up in with the new parking. Make sure there's enough room there for a lot of people like to fish off the bank, and they're going to do it whether we tell them to do it or they can't do it. So I just want to make sure we leave enough, not really even a sidewalk, just a place for them to stand and fish off the bank. It looks, and you can't tell by this drawing, but just want to consider that we have enough.
on this east side here, is that what you're talking about, or on the road coming in?
On the
north?
top side,
on the canal.
On the canal side,
Where
I
it
got
goes
you.
under the bridge.
Yep.
Yeah.
they make that turn.
I believe there will be enough room there. We walked it. There's going to be a new rail put in. We took the old rail that was taken down and we kept it. And we're going to reinstall the railing so cars won't go into the canal. And when we do that, it's going to leave an area for people to fish behind it. And then, of course, you got the riprap rocks on the bank. So it'll be wider than that for people
And
to fish.
the second item is when we bid this out, let's make sure we do it with a couple of alternates in case we don't have the money to do it.
Good.
For our most important things, and then
We'll break the sidewalk certainly separate and the walkways, and
maybe even some of the parking.
we could do the
Things are
pavement.
high nowadays, and it's,
We can do the paving as an alternate. That's a good idea to have it priced separately so we can pick and choose.
and just popped into my head. I know about a year ago we had a group here that was where we had the public meetings about the lakefront improvements with the boat docks and the new basin and all that. Where do we, just as information, where do we stand on that, and then how will it tie in with this parking?
This is consistent with it. This area was going to be revamped for the parking anyway, so there's nothing deleted here from that potential plan that the board adopted. The only area, we're not really doing any improvements in the open space area where the existing bathrooms are, except the walkway. That's all that's being proposed. So that grassway area will be left. You also notice at the end of the westernmost tier of parking, there's a grassed area where there's a big tree. This doesn't disrupt that. So you could have a natural area there that you could put a picnic shelter or something of that nature. Most of the other stuff was west of the bridge, and we're not doing anything with that. It's all just grassed at this point for overflow parking or anything else that's done. So nothing here would preclude that. It just makes it more accessible. And it's the only things we could really tie to the bridge project, because it's disrupting the parking, it's moving the walkways, it's leaving gaps. So that was a clear fit. But this would not preclude any future consideration for things like were on the master plan that was developed. Because the access for future potential boat ramps were on the west side of the bridge. This is all on the east side. But good questions, good comments.
So that map that you have there, that drawing, and the aerial, you'll be able to give that to us.
Yeah, I'll forward you copies of those too. Because it gives an aerial view of the existing now, and it's a little easier to tell once you flip back and forth the changes. So I'll shoot you that.
Okay, any other questions or comments? So this resolution allows Johnson Engineering to draw these plans.
Right.
And
Modify
get,
permit.
and get the pricing and
Get the
then
permit.
make a recommendation.
Okay, do we have a motion? Motion by Highslope, second by Edmonds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Dave.
The next item is appointments to the Planning and Zoning Board. You guys see Mr. Lou Hughes and Mr. McGahee, of course, vacated their positions, and we have, I think we had, what, 4 names, but only 2 are eligible.
Actually, the third one is now eligible. He was employed at the time this was prepared and is no longer employed, Mr. Hector Guardia. And so you actually have 3 of those applicants who are eligible. The 4th one doesn't live in the city, is not eligible, Mr. Gonzalez.
That for months we've made these postings of these 2 positions, and I think it's important that we fill the position so that we have a full P&Z board, because if you have one member missing, then you don't have a quorum. I know that Mr. Tapia and Dr. Van have both been city residents for, well, I think Mr. Tapia's been here for decades, and I know Dr. Van has a business here and has expressed an interest. So I'll make a motion to appoint Rinaldi Tapia and Dr. Andy Van to the P&Z board based on their interest to wanting to serve.
I'll second that motion. I know
Okay,
both the parties in there.
Okay, motion by Gardner, second by Edmonds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Right. Let's see, next we have a presentation of the golf course financing proposal. Is that you, or is that Randy?
Yes, you have the memo that I wrote there. Essentially, we received only one bid for the financing. That was the original offer by First Bank that obviously is very competitive at a 2% fixed interest for 10 years with no prepayment penalty. So we recommend awarding to First Bank that financing.
Mayor, even though my employment status at First Bank has changed, I will abstain from discussion on this project and the second one that's before us for the line of credit.
So
So we're, before you, the commission, there's a letter, if you remember the financing of the golf course project, it's all in, memo of the city manager. Give you a minute to go over that again.
it's up to 1.2 million, 2% fixed for 10 years with no prepay. We'll proceed with your approval to get that in taken care of.
You can see the various entities that are helping with that project. So I will entertain a motion for the funding of the golf course irrigation project of 1.2 million at 2% for 10 years with no prepayment penalty.
So moved.
Motion by Highslope. Pass the gavel to the vice mayor and I'll second it.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, we'll move on to we'll go ahead and do the LOC for DOT and then we'll go back to old business.
Yeah, I'll ask Sherry to come up, and she has a memo there, and she can hit the highlights of it. Last year when this came up, while she's coming up, the commission had asked that we check with other banks, and Sherry did, and you see the comparison. So I'll give it to her, and our recommendation, I concur with her recommendation at the end of the memo. The only thing I'd ask is when the board acts upon it, if you approve it, to include, authorize the letter of credit with the recommended bank and authorize the mayor to execute the documents required. Sherry, go ahead.
Sherry Howell, Finance. Yes, the memo to Mr. Martin includes the quotes that I got for the letter of credit that we're required to have on file for the Florida Department of Transportation Community Aesthetic Feature, which is the agreement that we have with DOT for the two welcome signs east and west of town. One of those signs is on the FDOT right-of-way, and because of that, statutorily, you're required to have a line of credit that is up to the amount that DOT estimated would take to restore the property to the way it was before the sign. If anything ever happened, if the sign was to be destroyed or something of that nature. And so we have to have this letter of credit for as long as we have the agreement or the signs. And so that's what this does. And since 2019, we've had it. We've had it with First Bank. It's been unsecured and it's cost approximately $125 a year. So I was asked to get quotes for it. And so I did. And included here is First Bank's for $125 a year for a period of 24 months. And then Seacoast gave me a quote for $450 a year. It requires a CD for that amount of money for the letter of credit, which is $28,236, and that would be at an interest rate of 4.5%. So we are asking to renew our letter of credit with First Bank.
Any more questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion. Motion by Thompson.
Second.
Second by Highslope. Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll go back to old business now. Anything? The old business list that anybody wants to bring up or something that needs to go on the list?
I just want to follow up from our last workshop. I know that we had talked about notification letters going to the outstanding delinquent liens. I didn't know where we were at on that.
We have started the process. I don't believe all of them have been sent. Debbie's doing double duty now, but I think she and Dylan were going to work on the language. I don't know. She hasn't sent you anything. I'll follow up with her. She's she's out. Her mother's ill, so she's out for a couple of days. But I'll follow up with her.
And then we also, at the workshop, we discussed section 110-528, and about the enforcement of that ordinance within the city on, I think it was 4 establishments. So I just didn't know where we were at on that one.
We're in process of doing an inspection of each of the facilities. Those are being planned.
All right.
And you'll get an update once we do those inspections.
Thank you.
There's nothing else under old business. Monthly activity reports. Questions of our directors that are here or the manager? The permit, we got a new permit list.
Just to note that the permit list has now gone to the actual corporations or the entities that are doing the work versus the homeowner's name. So I don't know if we're still making, if we have changed the process so that we issue them correctly to the owner as well as to the current property owner.
Travis, you want to comment on that?
Is community development. I think, what was your question?
Well, before we used to have the permits were issued in the name of the property owners, and we had brought up about people who were no longer living in those residences.
Yes, correct.
Pulling their permits.
Yeah.
When they couldn't because they were deceased. But now we're getting them in the names of the
Right.
businesses that are
Correct.
pulling the permits.
Right, actually, the person applying for the permit, because that did get very confusing and it was a very easy fix. The owner of the property has nothing to do with who the city issued the permit to. So the permit is issued either to a licensed contractor or an owner if they are legally able to get the permit. So that way it took that out where you'd have public look at that and say, well, what happened here? So it was a very easy fix. We're still moving with Tyler Software, changing our software program. In fact, we got notified by Blueprints, which is our current software provider, that they will soon be discontinuing service. So it worked out. But yes, to answer your question, a good pickup on that we only put the name of the person for the permit is issued, either corporation or owner.
And how long do you think that transferred into Tyler or will take place?
They've said they've done it with our current vendor before, so they have a team that's experienced with it. So once they have finished their webinar demo with us and we accept it, I'll bring it to the manager. If approved, I would say probably a matter of a week, so maybe possibly.
By next month, we should know whether.
Well, we'll know hopefully if we're going to make the change. It sounds like they can do it. They've done it before. We'll see if they can do that, and the price is within budget.
Talking about from Blueprints to Tyler?
Right, Blueprints to Tyler. If it's not within budget, then the manager will be bringing back to you possibly a change in our budget to do that.
If it doesn't work with Tyler, then what are the options?
There are other companies out there, but finance I know would like us to be with Tyler because there's a lot of things that the state, I can remind you that have legislated that we do certain things online, we take credit card payments, we do all that. We are now obligated to do that in Florida statute. We haven't been able to do that with the software we have. So we have to get those things in line. The state has said we have to do it. We just haven't got there yet.
The date's already passed, by the way.
We're getting there.
No, I'm not on y'all. I'm just saying I know how difficult it is. I'm just letting you know that that date has long gone.
It is.
Since.
But we're not the only one.
We're not the only one, but there are folks out there who look for that and they challenge you because there is a mechanism in the statute for penalties against the municipalities or the counties that have not done it.
We're on our way though.
We're on our way.
Anything else under activity reports? Comments from the manager?
Nothing in addition.
From the attorney?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have some comments regarding the adult arcade discussion we had at our last workshop meeting. And as it relates to Senate Bill 250 that was passed in this most recent legislature. So what I took away from our last discussion at our meeting was there was a desire to perhaps move forward with a moratorium on the development of new uses while we take a look at our current code and see if we can amend that. I was in the process of writing that up and doing my due diligence on that, and as part of that, what came up was some recent legislation that was passed in the most recent session. That was SB 250, and it was a bill that was, its purpose was to assist businesses to recover from Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Nicole, which struck the state recently. It's got a ton of different items within that legislation regarding things like issuing building permits and emergency aid relief money. But another item that was included within that bill was a sort of wide sweeping prohibition on municipalities enacting new development regulations. Now, it is limited to any municipality which is located, the specific languages, that those prohibitions apply to any county or municipality that is located entirely or partially within 100 miles of where either Hurricane Ian or Hurricane Nicole made landfall. I did the calculation on Google Maps myself, and it seems like the city fell within the Hurricane Ian landfall. Now, what does that specific code section say? It says that if you fall within that category, a municipality shall not propose or adopt any moratorium on construction, reconstruction, or redevelopment of any property damage, or propose or adopt more restrictive or burdensome amendments to its comprehensive plan or land development regulations. So my concern, having reviewed that legislation, is that even if you were to propose a moratorium to review that code section and to consider adopting changes, those changes would presumably be, if you're adding on anything to them, it would probably fall within that category of more restrictive or more burdensome. Now, any moratorium or amendments that are adopted by a municipality that meets that criteria, more restrictive or more burdensome, are automatically null and void ab initio and can also be challenged. So my concern is if the city wanted to move forward to enact a moratorium, I don't think it would be allowed under that prohibition. Even outside of our discussion regarding that specific use case, this is a wide sweeping prohibition that a lot of communities are dealing with right now. Because if you take a moment and consider what that language says, it says you cannot enact any change to your comp plan or any land development regulations that are more burdensome than what you currently have. And if you're within that area, I think I saw some news where one of the affected communities over on the West Coast was actually complaining. One of the communities that was really damaged by the storm was saying, this is, we appreciate the help from the legislature, but we can't do anything that we were trying to do in our community. We can't even assist our community in making any positive changes now because you've given us this, land development regulation.
Tied your hands, yeah.
With there's no time limit.
There is a time limit. It's 1 year. So it expires in October of 2024.
Well, on October the 2nd, we will do the moratorium.
Right. So that's why I wanted to brief you all on that and explain. I don't think we can move forward with that at this time.
But we can't enforce our ordinance.
We can enforce our current ordinance. And this doesn't only apply to that discussion, but if there was anything, that the city was going to be considering changing our comp plan or any of our land development regulations, it's unlikely that we'd be able to do so, or we'd have to take a very careful look at what we were doing to make sure it wouldn't, run afoul of that particular legislation. Now that legislation expires next year in October. So after that period of time, us and any other municipality within that range is back to normal. You can enact whatever you need to at that point. It's something I needed to bring your attention based off of the direction you provided me at our last meeting.
No notes or asterisks or anything that said even if your town wasn't affected in the 100 mile, nothing like that.
So that's the thing. So the first part of the ordinance specifically limits, it does limit moratoriums to, you can enact a moratorium that affects property damaged by the storm. But the second part of it says you cannot propose or adopt more restrictive or more burdensome amendments to your comp plan or land development regulations, period. And without that qualifier of being applied to damaged property only. It's incredibly wide open.
Sounds to me like it all is damaged property only. Can we not read that in there somehow? That it move that comma or
Says
something?
or.
Yeah, sounds like some developers.
Yeah, it probably was.
So
There was some careful wording done, that's for sure.
Fort Myers Beach.
Can't throw common sense out with the bathwater, so to speak. Well, for now, we'll enforce what we have and do the inspections and of course the parking and all that. You have any other good news?
that's it for me tonight.
I'm playing, but no, thanks for bringing that up. I mean,
Thanks for checking.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't heard it mentioned until he brought it up.
Yeah,
It's the
I guess
first
it-
time I've heard that mentioned. I'm shocked. I thought we should have heard about that before.
okay, we'll move on to comments from the city commission. Commissioner Edmonds.
I feel like we need to enforce our ordinances and our laws and follow through with, taking care of our community and keeping our parks safe. So our, people can get out and walk in the mornings and the evenings and feel safe and not have to carry, pepper spray or, things like that. It is disturbing when you walk through my neighborhood and you have people with tents set up in our parks and things like that. So that is disturbing to me. Also, I feel like I'm very disappointed that we can't really change our ordinances and our laws about our gaming centers and things like that because I don't really understand the draw of what I see, and I haven't really seen any illegal activity, but not taking care of the facilities and the parking lots and things like that in the area where the gaming centers are. So that's disappointing that we can't really do anything unless we, actually see somebody out there doing drugs or, relieving themselves in the parking lot and things like that. So anyway, those are my concerns.
Thompson?
I am glad to hear that our officers responded quickly to the call for that. I also see them out in front of the hospital. Some homeless people are on the side of those office buildings up front. They found them there just the other night. As he said, we are limited. I think we have 2 officers per shift. And maybe we can request some assistance from the SO, just a thought, if they aren't already. I had a question for our engineer. Have you noticed how much water that bridge is holding at the top? There's only drainage at the bottom, and it comes up and then goes down. I don't know how that water is expected to get up over the top and get to that bottom.
There was a little bit. The top, it looked like it was both sides. One side just had a little bit of gravel blocking it. On the west side, there's a patch that was put in.
Are they gonna raise it or are they gonna put drainage at the top?
They raised it. Danny's inspected right after this last rain.
And I wanted to ask Randy, our legislative trip to Tallahassee, how's that coming? Did he
I've
pick
talked to
date?
to our lobbyist, and we're working on trying to see what's some good dates and so forth. We already have the legislative day that the league has, and I was checking with the county to see when they're going. They usually go when the county has their day, but I haven't heard the date for the county yet. But I'll get you those dates.
And I'd like to see in the future mandatory that all the directors attend our monthly meetings. In case of emergency, you know, they, as the chief has, have a designee come so they can contribute to the conversation and answer any questions that may arise during the meetings. Can you make that possible? We don't have very many.
Well,
Once a month.
I'll certainly take it under consideration and give you a recommendation, but I do have them here when there's something on the agenda that they are needed for. Granted, occasionally you'll have citizen pop up, but in all frankness, I don't think it's a good idea to respond directly immediately without doing the proper research. And sometimes, just historically, the city had long, lengthy discussions on items that weren't on the agenda because of that practice of department heads coming up and answering questions during meetings that were set for an agenda. But I certainly am glad to discuss that with the commission and give you my recommendation.
Well, as you see tonight, I had questions.
Sure.
If they're a director, they should be professional enough to know what to answer and what not to, especially if it's coming from this commission or
well,
president.
But you also can have citizens who want to inquire and be inquisitive of them, and you get a back and forth going. And in all honesty, historically, that didn't work out so well for the city, in my observation, looking at meetings when that was done. We have most of them attend, but and some not directors, but having them here when they can. Certainly, I encourage them to attend when they can, but sometimes there's conflicts. But,
well, that's my point. If there's an emergency that's approved by you, is to have a designee here that can be readily available to answer questions and capable of answering questions, especially from the commission.
Typically, I'll try to be able to answer most of them, but in their absence. But
so that's a no.
No, that's not a no. I would like to think on it and give you a collective response.
That's all I have.
Islip?
I echo the other commissioners' concern about, you know, the homeless situation, and but I too am very glad that you guys were able to respond to Ms. Buson's call in a timely fashion, and but I do see a couple, like that situation and perhaps the parking at the Hampton Inn in the grass, where if we would make an example out of, you know, a handful of folks, maybe we can build a reputation for being rather no nonsense. Not many people speed through South Bay.
Bill.
You know,
And they haven't ran traffic.
Yeah, and that's from 30 years ago.
right. I mean, Caleb does, but anyway, that's a different story. Anywho, I'd like to see us do that as well. Just build a little bit of a better reputation. Thank you, Jim. And we were supposed to have South Florida Ag Foundation last week. I apologize to the commission for the late notice of canceling that, but the government almost shut down caused a change in the plans up in DC, so they were not able to get down, but we'll get that going for February.
All right. Further?
Something that Commissioner Heislip brought up about the parking behind the Hampton Inn. I know that there was going to be more, I guess, better signs behind there. I don't know if those have been installed yet. It's
They
still
have
a
to get
small.
approval from Hilton, but I haven't seen them.
Is there, since it's our right of way, is there something that we can put up there?
We'll follow up.
Because I haven't seen any semis there. I don't know if anybody has had any calls. Or
I got a text message.
okay, so it's happening again after
I
our
haven't
meeting.
seen any semis parked there, and the
It
grass.
It might not have been. I think it was
Yeah.
a truck and trailer
the grass
rig.
hasn't been damaged, and they have called and reported it, and they had at least one incident.
But there's
Yeah.
no signage yet.
Well, there's
So
just
there
a
is
small,
sign, but
there's
it's
a
a
small
temporary.
no parking that's on the ground basically. So it's not like a city sign that says no
Yeah, we
right,
can-
no parking.
Well, and we can
because it is
certainly-
our right of way.
Yeah, and we're going to put it on the private property, and we certainly can put anything on the public property. But I will follow up with them.
We should talk to them and just see. But I think if we just put our sign on in the middle of that area, I think it's we have signs everywhere. We have them on Francisco. No
But
dumping
only where
allowed.
The ordinance prohibits it.
Sorry.
Only where the ordinance prohibits it, I
Correct.
believe. Yeah.
Correct. But that is a right of way.
There is no designated parking there on his site, but we'll follow up with it and get signage.
Well, just because of the safety issue, and I think that if they're parking in areas the semis aren't, I appreciate truck drivers and the work that they do, but if they're parking where they shouldn't be parking, especially when it's our parking area around the tennis courts and around those areas, we should set an example.
And
Because and maybe they have been because I haven't seen them lately, but we should. I agree. We need to set the example when they're parking where they shouldn't be parking.
There is no designated parking there, so that's an easy one. It's not parking area.
Right.
But
Right. That's just for vehicles. I know that tonight we did have something highly unusual by adding a proclamation. I just felt that it was important because of the highest levels of our federal government and our state government that our country has spoken up. This does not lessen the concerns I think that all of us have when we have friends who have been impacted by decisions that have been made over the decades. But I think as this country was formed on our Judeo-Christian background and beliefs, especially Psalm 122:6, I felt it was important that us as a community, that we bless Israel with a show of support because that is our biblical foundation. And I appreciate that the City Commission approved the proclamation because we are called to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, that thou shalt prosper that love her. So that's my only comment tonight.
Into that. No, I really don't have anything to add. I mean, I agree with the comments tonight. Let's just not keep kicking the can down the road on some of these issues. I mean, we can resolve a lot of them. We did for years have the directors come to the meeting, maybe not always the library director, because it's kind of a little different. She's kind of isolated in her own little world, but it is a good idea sometimes. I definitely like you to consider that and reach out to the director. I think really, are we only missing one?
no, with several.
Recreation director.
Robbie, recreation, golf course, library. There's a bunch of them are directors, and Debbie's sort of quasi in the
Yeah, but
code
she's usually
enforcement.
here anyway.
She comes on when there's code enforcement issues. The only thing is, I don't know, historically the city did it before it was a city manager form of government, and I really didn't come prepared to debate it tonight, but I think that's the manager's responsibilities to manage the directors and hold them accountable and take action rather than board members going directly to them. That sort of flies in the face of that, whether it be in a meeting or in anywhere else. We haven't had an issue with that in the city of Clewiston since I've been here, to my knowledge. I've not found an issue with it, but if there's a specific need for it, if I'm not able to provide the adequate information, then certainly we want to make sure the commission gets it. But that's why I've typically only had them here for agenda topics, because it didn't seem reasonable as many hours as some of them put in, and they're not compensated for extra hours to require all of them to be here for every meeting. We do it at workshops and things where there's agendas for that, but I'll certainly take it under advisement.
But Randy, I've been here, through the whole process, and I have been at meetings where there's been a lot of give and take between directors, and it's put them in a hard spot because they haven't had a chance to talk to the city manager, who is technically their boss. But I have seen over the years that we have formed advisory boards. We have the library advisory board, we have the golf course advisory board, we have now a new recreation advisory board, and our new chairman is here. I just noticed her earlier. Dusty, thank you for taking that on. And I think that those meetings we're going to cover those three areas. And so I think it's important that, they're going to be making recommendations to us. And I encourage the community, if they have concerns with the library, recreation, golf course, that those are advisory meetings and they're open to the public. And that those are a great place to go to those meetings and voice concerns. So then it's brought up, Randy's aware of it, and it's brought to our attention as well. Now, if there's an emergency situation, Greg, which I think is what you brought up.
Emergency situation where they couldn't show up. And that's not my intent, is to grill somebody or that's not the point. Is this, we have questions that arise because somebody from the public shows up. And we have a question, somebody's here to answer.
I don't honestly.
I think it's asking too much for once a month.
I was just giving you my perspective from a historical perspective and how things have changed.
In all frankness,
I
don't think we've had very many questions the board has asked that we were prepared to answer that would have been any different had someone been here that wasn't here. But I'll be glad to give you my recommendation, and then the board can direct me as you choose.
I feel like the recreation director did a great job about on the fall festival.
I agree.
Had a lot of good comments.
It was a great event. Thank you.
Even after, right now, the pumpkin patch, I know that even afterwards, people have enjoyed that. So that's been nice by the youth center.
Maintaining that. Yeah.
No, just that it's there. Yeah, that it's just through the fall. Even through maybe the trunk or treat.
Yeah, I think as long as it's not a maintenance issue with them getting wet, it's tough with straw when it gets wet. But they're going to leave it out there as long as they can. The pumpkins.
A lot of people are going up taking pictures.
Oh, they really were. And that day of, it was a lot, as you know. You saw them.
It seems like everybody's taking a picture, taking a pumpkin with them.
Yeah, that's fine. That's a good way to get rid of them.
Maybe they think they can.
If we put up a sign, take a pumpkin, they probably wouldn't.
Right.
Some would.
Mr. Mayor, I do think it is important to recognize the new rec board.
Yes.
They have hit the ground running, and one meeting a month wasn't sufficient for them to, accomplish the action items that they wanted to see get done. So they're meeting, twice a month?
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
Through second week of December.
There's a lot to do.
I've been to both of their meetings thus far, and they're an enthusiastic group. So I think it'll be
Looking
great.
forward to a schedule of events. But thank you, Dusty, and the other guys that have signed up for that.
She's a new chairperson.
We'll even let you say something if you would like tonight. Appreciate your team and what you've already, like Hillary said, hit the ground running. So
It's exciting to watch.
I'm Dusty McDuffie. I'm the new Recreation Board chairperson, and I want to thank the commission for appointing me as onto the rec board. It has really opened my eyes. I've been a part of the community with my kids, of course, for Landon's 30, so 28 years, 30 years, and I've really, really enjoyed it. But there are a lot of challenges, and we have a really great board that they're all working all the time, and we're not allowed to kind of chat with each other except for our board meetings. So it's really important to me to get together with them more often until we can at least find solutions to the things that have been brought to our attention whether we're in the grocery store or whatever, and we're being approached, or we're, the public comes up and speaks to us at our meetings, we want to address those, get solutions so we can move forward. And I felt like we wouldn't be able to really do that just coming in once a month. Then the icing on the cake is to implement programs for our children, our youth, our teenagers, our seniors, just citizens of our community, and just make it a better place. It's such a wonderful place, but everything, we can always do better. So I just appreciate you letting me do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Big gap to fill. We didn't have a director or a board or anything for, 6 years?
Several years.
Yes, so.
Good to know we're catching up.
All right. Any other comments? We will have a motion to adjourn. Motion and second by Edmonds.